because God is with us. In verse 4, it says, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. I learned it, yea. You know, that's kind of a funny, yea, though I walk through the, and even, which means even though, but you know, when we go and cheer somebody, we say, yea. How many of us can say yea when we're walking through the valley of the shadow of death? How many of us can cheer because God is with us? Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil, for you're with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. And this doesn't say, though I walk through the valley of death here. It says the shadow of death. Oh, God's with us in that other place, but this is the valley of shadow. The valley of shadow of death. What is death? Death is separation from God. For the Christian, it's the beginning of eternity with God. But for those who don't know Christ, it's an eternity of being away from God in a way they've never known before. Because in this life, though we're away from God, we're not out of His presence. You understand that? You're in God's presence in this life because God is everywhere in this life. We can be away from Him spiritually, but we're never out of His presence. Death brings an end to His presence. Those that think that death will be a continuation of what's going on with them in life that aren't Christians, they're deceiving themselves to think that it can't get worse. Because the very presence of God will be removed from them. And they'll know what true loneliness and pain feels like. But this isn't the valley of death. We'll talk about that later. This is the valley of the shadow of death. Shadows are darkness. Shadow is the absence of light, the unknown. A shadow has to do, when it talks of shadows, it talks of that which you can't see. You know how it is when the shadows get long and the sun's going down, it gets darker and darker in those places where there's no light shining, you can't see what's there. And you walk down a dark alley at night and you can't see what's behind the garbage cans or behind the dumpsters or who's lying in wait or what they want to do to you. And life is like that. A lot of times there's a lot of shadowy parts to life where we can't see what's in front of us. We can't see what the next step brings, but we know who's with us in that next step. And you know that the imagined troubles of life are usually worse than the reality that comes to pass. And experience shows it to be true. Many of the things that we worry most about, when we get on the other side of it, it's like, why did it consume so much of me? Why did I let it oppress me? Because God was with me all the way. John 16:33 says, I have told you these things. These are the words of Jesus, so that in me you may have peace. In this world you'll have trouble, but take heart because I've overcome the world. Jesus is always present with us. And He has authority. In Matthew, He said, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Therefore go. Because He sends that authority with us. And He said He'll be with us to the end of the age. So here we are. Jesus says, I've overcome the world. We know that He's with us. Why do we fear? 2 Corinthians 12:9 says this. Blink. But He said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. This is Paul writing to the Corinthian church. He said, you know what? God's grace is sufficient for me. When I'm weak, it gives God an opportunity to show how strong He is. I will rejoice. I'll boast more gladly. He's bragging about how weak he is because it shows everything he overcomes in life. He overcomes through the strength of God. Through Christ living in him. God will help us overcome any fear because he'll carry us through any trial. The valleys that we go through need not oppress us. He takes us also, secondly, through the valley of sickness. The valley of sickness. If we want to talk about shadows and worry, what about the valley of sickness? Let's look at Matthew chapter 6, verse 25. Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or what about your body, what you'll wear. Is not life more important than food, and the body more important than clothes? And the whole rest of that section up through verse 34 talks about trusting God for your needs. But I wanted to focus on that first verse. And here's why. We have learned how to worry about our food and drink like no other population in history has. See, when Jesus said this to the people, they would worry about, will we have something to eat? Will we have something to drink? And granted, there's a lot of people that wonder where the next meal's coming from. But we live in such abundance that we have to worry about, of all the choices we have to eat and drink, what choices are going to harm us and not. We worry about our fat intake. We worry about stuff that feeds our cholesterol. We worry about our salt and what it does to our blood pressure. We worry about trans fats. We worry about calories. Am I missing some? There's a million things that we've been told will hurt us in our food. Monosodium glutamate. Yeast is bad for some people. Wheat is bad for some people. Some people are lactose intolerant. Got some more? Everything we stick in our mouth can hurt us. A lot of times what comes out of our mouth can hurt us. We have learned how to worry about not just whether we'll eat or drink, but whether we're eating the wrong things, whether we're eating the wrong portions. We've learned all kinds of new worries that people used to live 100 years and never worry about. We shouldn't be irresponsible having that knowledge. We should put that knowledge to work. And better every day. And God, pray for me. God, pray for me. Pray to yourself for me. You guys pray to God for me. To every one of us. For every one of us. That we would do better every day. I wish we didn't have so many things to fear putting in our mouth. But willingly reducing the amount of choices that we have is a lot more difficult than just not having the choices. We live in abundance. And then we have to worry whether we're making the wrong choices. And then we make right choices and some things don't change. And so we wonder, well, what good did that do? And we worry whether we should listen to what doctors say because they change their mind every 6 months. And sometimes we need to get back to the basics of what the Bible says and listen to what God's telling us. Is that really good for you? Sometimes he'll be saying that probably. But should we worry about ourselves constantly? Or should we just make good choices and then trust God for whatever the results are? And if it don't change, do we trust God when we don't see the results that we're looking for? Our health has gone from a major priority to a major fixation. What is the next thing that we can worry about eating? What is the next knee-jerk reaction that can be made over statistics that come to us through uncontrolled studies? Why worry? Make good choices. Trust God. If something doesn't change, he's got something else in mind. One of the things he's got in mind is heaven. Is my whole life based around how long I get to stay here? I hope not. I hope it's more defined by how many people I try to bring with me when I go.